Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Black and Latinx Business Town Hall, where we'll be discussing an action that BECMA and our partners took just about 3 weeks ago. My name is Shagun Idowu. I have the privilege of serving as the president and CEO of the Black Economic Council of Massachusetts. And I want to thank all of you who are our members and our partners and supporters who are joining us this morning to have this important discussion where we're able to explain and answer questions about the action that we took against the city of Boston regarding its disparity study. And so I just, before passing it off to our partners at Amplify Latinx, the Greater Boston Latino Network, and the Lawyers for Civil Rights, want to level set just to explain a little bit of the history behind the issues when it comes to procurement with the city of Boston for Black and Latinx businesses, which kind of lead up to the action that we took. This didn't come out of nowhere. And so this was an issue long before Mayor Marty Walsh became mayor of the city of Boston in 2013. This is certainly an issue that we faced under former Mayor Menino, under Mayor Kevin White, and many others. But this issue really came to a head in 2003 when an affirmative marketing program that was aided in the setup by then Councilor Bruce Bowling to ensure that the city of Boston was doing business with Black and other minority-owned businesses, it was taken down by then Mayor Menino. And the numbers when it came to contracting with our businesses plummeted to where we are having this discussion now at 1% or less than that. And so in 2013, when then Representative Walsh, candidate Walsh, was running for mayor, he explained that doing business with our businesses would be a priority for the administration. And upon entering office, discussions around a disparity study came up in order to understand how the city was doing business with our businesses and to help chart the way forward. You'll remember that the administration began in the year 2014. It was not until 4 years later that the city actually conducted this disparity study. But prior to that, in 2016, Mayor Walsh signed his first executive order. It was called an interim executive order promoting equity in public procurement. And this particular executive order set goals in the construction industry for minority and women-owned businesses. Later on in 2017, the city put out a request for proposal for the disparity study. And in 2018, they signed an agreement with a group, BBC Consulting, based in Denver, Colorado. In 2019, upon discovering that the city was not complying with an ordinance that the city council had passed. It was written by then Councilor Presley and Councilor Wu. It was called Equity and City Contracting. It, among other things, called not only for setting goals with our businesses, but also in quarterly reporting out of how the city was complying. The city was not publishing these reports publicly. And so a hearing was held by Councilor Wu and Councilor Janey to get an understanding of how the city was doing. It was at this hearing that we now know the famous 0.4%, the fact that the city was doing less than 0.5% of its business with Black and Latinx businesses in 2018 alone. After that hearing, BECMA and our partners began to reach out to the mayor to not only get an understanding of what actions they were taking, but to make our own proposals for moving forward. Fast forward to the next year where the mayor signs his second executive order where he provides more support for the Office of Economic Development and creates his Supplier Diversity Council. And here we are now in 2021, where this disparity study was finally released. And the data was alarming to all of us, though we were not surprised by what it found. And that was that over a 5-year period where $2 billion were spent on 47,000 contracts, less than 0.5%, 0.4% of that business, $9.4 million went to Black businesses, and 0.8% or $18 million went to Latinx-owned businesses. And so all of that to say, that is why we are where we are today. This is why BECMA and our partners at Amplify and GBLN teamed up with the Lawyers for Civil Rights to file our civil rights complaint against the city of Boston, because despite all of the pronouncements and the executive orders and the policies that have been complied with or not complied with, we still find it difficult as a city to move to whole numbers in doing business with our businesses. And just to finally end here, the reason why this is an important issue for all of our groups is because we know that public contracts are key to not only helping our businesses become stabilized, but to helping them scale. It is the public contract that has allowed many of the large businesses that we see today, whether it be in construction or professional services, that one key government contract allowed them to hire more people, to invest more in their business, and to provide better and growing services to the community. And so we want those opportunities too. And the city continues to drag its feet on this issue. And so this is why we took this action, of which we'll be explaining later on with the Lawyers for Civil Rights, what this means for the city, what it means for our businesses, and what it means for our future. So again, I thank all of you for joining us today. I'm going to turn the floor over to one of our partners, Betty Francisco, representing Amplify Latinx, which has been a key partner of ours on many, many issues over the last few years. And we're happy to be joining forces with them again on this issue, and happy that they're able to join us today. Betty?
Great. Good morning, Segun. Thank you so much for those opening remarks. And just a kudos to you, to BECMA, and to LCR for your leadership and for the ongoing advocacy on this issue. You've been steadfast partners with us, and we so appreciate everything that you've done for quite a bit of time. And I want to thank everyone that's joining us today on this live stream. Many of our community advocates that are here today have been working for decades on addressing these issues of contracting disparities, and we thank you for staying the course and for continuing to advocate and demand equality and opportunity. So just a little bit about Amplify Latinx. We are a nonprofit focused on building economic and political power in the Commonwealth, and we have an initiative called Power Up, which works with Latino-owned businesses in the state to create visibility for them, facilitate connections to existing resources, and to help them grow. We've also been advocating on a number of fronts, including with BECMA as leading on this issue of contracting in terms of state contracting access, corporate contracting access, and now this issue with city contracts. So contracting has been a key issue across our organizations. It's something that from survey data from last year, during the summer, we heard Latino-owned and Black-owned businesses name capital and access to contracts as some of the key needs that they have to move into the economic recovery and just to survive and stabilize their businesses. So our organizations understand that this issue is deeply rooted in existing inequities and in the longstanding policies and systems within our organizations, or I should say our public organizations, and much of it is rooted in structural racism. So as you saw, the Disparity Study showed that 1.2 of the 2.1 billion spent in public contracts went to Latino-owned businesses and Black-owned businesses. And Segun may have touched on this already, 3.6% of Black-owned businesses were shown to be available for work. So when the city did their research on this, they did a lot of outreach across Boston, Greater Boston, and where they engaged in contracting and found that there was quite a bit of availability by Black-owned businesses. However, only 0.4% of those businesses received contracts. For Latino businesses, the study found that 1.2% of these businesses were available for city work, and yet 0.8% received contracts. So what that shows you is that there's significant there's significant availability, but lack of opportunity in getting those contracts. And when we quantify that, that represents a $78 million lost opportunity, right, for Black and Latino businesses to gain business, to gain these contracts that can help them grow. And we think these numbers, in fact, could have been a little bit higher because the availability data is based on responses from these businesses. And for Latino businesses and other businesses, for example, Haitian-owned or Cape Verdean-owned Brazilian-owned, the response rates sometimes tend to be lower. Amplify decided to join this complaint with BECMA and Lawyers for Civil Rights and the Greater Boston Latino Network as a necessary legal action because of the urgency required in this matter. We no longer want incremental change. We need bold change. And the failure to contract with Black and Latinx businesses is a direct violation of civil rights. And it's time that we take a bold stand. So Amplify often hears from Latino businesses that there is a need for transparency. They don't understand the contracting process. They need better language access, better communication with the city, and they're looking for accountability and enforcement in terms of these goals that have been put out but haven't been reached. And often they're frustrated because the process to contract with the city takes a long time. They don't know how to navigate the system. There's structural barriers relating to size of contracts, insurance requirements, bonding requirements, even payments. Time to get payments often lead to the inability to take on these contracts. And then when it comes to certification, it's a long and tedious process. And while it has gotten better over time, it still can be transformed so that it creates much more access for Black and Latinx businesses. So we hope that this complaint will ultimately lead to a more equitable result. The reason that we filed this complaint together with these groups is that it will look towards a community-mediated process. This isn't just about agencies or groups saying that this must happen. It's around engaging community voices, Black, Latinx, other small businesses to come to the table together with the city and shape a contracting process that has transparency, accountability, and enforcement. And Amplify, along with our partners, BECMA, LCR, and Greater Boston Latino Network, are positioned to bring those businesses to the table and to have a participatory process. So we look forward to collaborating on these actions and to taking your questions to see what you're hearing. We'd love to get a better sense of some of the challenges or barriers you faced, because part of coming to a better solution and an agreement with the city on this matter will require that we hear directly from you. So I'm now going to turn it to our partners at Lawyers for Civil Rights, to Aaron, to talk a little bit more about this complaint and the legal process that comes with it, and the distinction between what we call a suit versus a complaint. This is an administrative process, a little bit different. So we welcome, Aaron, your remarks for the audience. Thank you.
Thank you, Betty, and thank you to both Betty and Shagun and Amplify Latinx, BECMA, and GBLN for all of your leadership on this issue. You've been absolutely wonderful partners, and we look forward to continuing to work with you. I also very much appreciate Betty mentioning that, this has involved decades of advocacy on the part of community advocates like everyone present, and so I also want to say thank you for all of you who have made this work possible. So I'm glad that Betty brought up the difference between a lawsuit and an administrative complaint. So this is an administrative complaint that we brought under Title VI. Title VI prohibits discrimination in federally assisted programs on the basis of race, color, or national origin. When a municipality or any other entity accepts federal funds, they agree to abide by Title VI and all of its accompanying regulations. So the city of Boston receives a lot of funds from the federal government, but in particular, it receives a lot of funds from the DOJ and the DOT. So because they have accepted these funds and agreed to abide by Title VI, the DOJ and the DOT have the ability to step in and investigate when they are discriminating on the basis of race, color, or national origin. And when I say they are discriminating, I mean the city of Boston, as they are and as they have been for decades. So we filed this complaint with the DOT and the DOJ because the city of Boston is a recipient of federal funding from both. And we know that the DOT and the DOJ are particularly interested in racial justice right now. And so, as Betty and Shagun have very helpfully explained, the Disparity Study confirmed what we've all known for decades, and that the city of Boston discriminates against Black and Latinx-owned businesses. So we are asking in our complaint for the DOT and the DOJ to step in, investigate, and facilitate a community-driven, community-centered, very collaborative approach to decision-making around this issue. The executive orders that we've seen, this executive order in the past couple of weeks, the one 5 years before that, the one 5 years before that, we've seen these over and over again. This is an example of top-down decision-making that does not include the voices of people who are directly impacted by discrimination. So what we are looking for is a community-driven process that includes BECMA, GBLN, Amplify Latinx, and all of the MBE community and advocates who have been working on this issue for decades to explore solutions that will move the needle forward. We want this to be highly collaborative. We've seen examples of this being successful. For example, a couple of years ago, we brought a similar type of complaint with HUD, the Housing and Urban Development Agency, on behalf of residents who did not have language access to the Suffolk Downs project. And so in that case, HUD came in and was able to investigate and facilitate a community-driven process, and were able to get voluntary compliance from the city, from BPDA, to have language access moving forward. So that was highly successful. We expect a similarly successful result with the federal government acting as a mediator. And so essentially, back to Betty's original point that this is different from a lawsuit. This is different. We're not filing in court. We're filing with the agency. We're expecting the agency to come in and investigate. There will not be a judge. Perhaps it will eventually lead to that sort of litigation, but this is very different in that we're asking not for a judgment, but for a collaborative process and investigation where the community can come together, give feedback, and come up with results that everyone who is directly impacted by this discrimination has an input in. So we very much appreciate the leadership of the community members, the leadership of Amplify Latinx, GBLN, BECMA, and all of the community advocates and MBEs that have been advocating for this for years and directly impacted by this for years. And so for next steps, we will continue to supplement with data about discrimination as it comes out. And we stand ready to work closely with the incoming administration to come up with solutions. Thank you, and I am happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Aaron and Betty, for your comments and for helping us understand the difference between the complaint and the lawsuit. This has been an educational experience, I think, for all of us, and understanding the different tools, the legal tools that we have to address these longstanding issues. So certainly, again, we have to keep reminding ourselves at BECMA the difference between a lawsuit and the federal complaint. But again, for everyone tuning in, as Aaron has noted, what the complaint allows us to do is to make sure that all of you are at the table with the city to determine how best we move forward, and that whatever commitments are elicited from the city, the federal government is there to watch over and ensure that the city actually follows through on those things, as opposed to what we've seen happen and why we're still at 0.4% or 0.8%, which is that they talk much, but we arrive nowhere. So a couple of questions that I'm seeing here in the chat, and we do want to encourage those of you who are tuning in, whether it be on YouTube or on Facebook, to type your questions into the chat, and we'll do our best to get to all of them and answer them as thoroughly as possible. So as I'm scrolling bottom up, the first question I see from Stephanie Martins, a counselor. Is there training available that we can bring to our Black and Latinx businesses on this? I'm happy to answer this one because I appreciate that question. But Betty noted actually in her remarks the idea of availability of our businesses. So for Black-owned businesses, the report notes that 3.6% of all the businesses that have capacity to take on contracts with the city were Black-owned, and that 1.2% of those businesses were Latinx-owned. But as Betty actually noted in another conversation on this earlier this week, that number is actually does not count everybody because a lot of these numbers were based on surveys, and we know that there have to be other ways that we reach out to our business owners to get a more accurate understanding. But on this idea, if there's training available, there are many organizations that provide technical assistance to our businesses to help them be prepared for these contracts. The city itself has its own technical assistance program, But again, what this report tells us, this disparity study, is that the fault does not lie at the feet of Black and Latinx-owned businesses, that we are available, we have the capacity, we have the desire to do business with the city, and yet we continue to be passed over for these opportunities. So yes, there's training available, but it looks as if the training is actually more needed on the city side to ensure that that they're not passing us over for these opportunities. But Betty or Erin, I don't know if you have any additional thoughts on that.
That's right, Sugun, and hi, Stephanie. It's great to have you on. So that's correct. We often say, when there's a lack of access, it's because the other party isn't trained, right? We see that too when we talk about leadership opportunities for people of color or women. Oh, they need more training, right? So yes, they're training around the process, around how to effectively bid is always needed. However, training, here I think is more around how do both parties, as Sugun mentioned, how do both sides, right, work together, meaning city contracting managers, how do they effectively work with our communities and understand the needs that they have? So, give you more a specific example. There was a story of a business that had an opportunity to do business with the city. However, it was for a purchase of certain goods, which they had to pre-order, right? So it was inventory they had to take in. They needed the capital to buy that inventory to fulfill the contract, and they didn't have the cash to buy the inventory. And so that business couldn't actually take on the contract, right? They didn't have the cash to buy that, and so they were available, right? They were ready. But this barrier existed, and the payment terms also were a barrier because the city doesn't pay for that contract for 30 days or 60 days, effectively, right, precluding that business from taking it on. So apparently the city does have some kind of capital fund, right, to purchase inventory, but this business didn't know that. So when we talk about training, right, it's not just like, here's how you do it, but here are the ways that you can effectively access a contract. If you have a barrier on insurance, if there's a barrier on, cash for inventory, this is what's available to you so you can actually take it on. So that's where I think training, if they're, it is training to be honed, is really how does it create more opportunity?
Yeah, and noting here, Stephanie, that absolutely this is a question or something that we can talk about Everett as well. So I do want to note too, for this complaint, even though we are doing this in the city of Boston, the other 350 cities and towns in the Commonwealth should not feel as if they're off the hook. Boston is just the first place where we're starting with this, but certainly we want to make sure that we're holding all cities and towns, including the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, accountable not only to the words that they say in terms of equity and treating our communities better than they have, but ensuring that we're getting access to all of these opportunities. Again, we all know that the health of some communities cannot coexist with the underdevelopment of others, and so that's again why we focus so much on this particular issue. And so Michelle, who is a BECMA member, and she might be an Amplify member as well. You can tell me if I'm right or wrong on that. But noting, yes, that she has a business, LatinaMBA.com, that helps to train purchasers, but asks a couple of questions here. So her first question is, the OIG General provides training for public purchasers, and part of their training states contracts will be awarded to the responsive and responsible bidder offering the lowest total price. Will anything be done to change this? Responsive and responsible offers much leeway by public entities in awarding contracts. And this seems to be really a question about Chapter 30B. I'm not sure if LCR has an opinion on this. I know that we're having internal conversations at BECMA about how to address that, but I'll cede the floor to Amplify or LCR if you have comments on that.
Yeah, I don't specifically know how to address this here, but this is part of what this complaint process, right? The mediation process can bring to light, right? So if this is about changing practices, this is one thing to bring out and to highlight, that is lowest price the criteria that should be the one used for awarding contracts, right? Is that actually create equitable outcomes? Clearly it doesn't. So this is where we need businesses like you, right, to come forth and be part of this process around coming up with the solutions, and to actually call out these kinds of practices and policies, right, that they're so in the weeds. But this, like, if you had not highlighted this, right, then it's not going to get addressed. So this is where, this gets very nuanced in terms of what are the policies that are actually creating these barriers, because it's deeply rooted in systems. So I think that this would be part of the conversation, right, about what additional criteria, and you're seeing this on the corporate contracting side, right? When you look at large corporations, they're starting to rethink how they do procurement, and it's not only around lowest price, right? They will look at other factors now. And so the same thing should be brought into the public procurement process, and adding additional criteria that creates more equity. And Michelle, if you want to, it sounds like you want to train, and this is, a perfect opportunity, right, to be in partnership with us and with the city as far as bringing forth your amazing training, or Latina MBA training.
Absolutely. And I note that our team has shared your website in the chat for folks to take a look at. And there's one other important point that I see Michelle bringing up, the idea of our businesses needing to get certified. This actually has come up in separate conversations as well, about whether or not we should continue to support minority-owned businesses or even women-owned businesses getting certified, because of course that means that the group that's getting all of the business, white male-owned companies, don't have to go through that process, and yet we have to pay for the process, and it's time-intensive, and ask for a lot of our personal information. Not sure, again, if either of you have thoughts on that. I know we have pointed thoughts on this issue, but want to allow space to address that as well.
Yeah, I think, the certification, if it looks like an additional hurdle for our businesses, right? That's what it's become, because the benefits of it haven't brought fruit to bear. So if it's a hurdle, it's a barrier. It perpetuates the structural racism that we see, and it should be either eliminated or restructured so that it actually, creates an incentive. It creates a value add, as opposed to being this extra hoop. And so, perhaps in the past that was the intention, to create more access, but that's not what it's doing right now. So I think it has to be revisited. It may not be that it goes away completely. Maybe there's a way to create a certification process that's more around helping businesses be really prepared, right, for contracting, so that they feel they have a leg up. Instead, they have greater access, but not have it become a barrier. And I think the depth in which the diligence goes into your business, maybe that should be, if that's applicable maybe to larger ones or to really, really large contracts, it shouldn't apply to small vendors at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I know on our end, we are exploring what other states do, because of course, again, there's a certain group that does not need to be certified. And so we're exploring what it would look like to introduce legislation that would force white men to also have to be certified if they want to do business with municipal or the state government, or to remove it entirely. But everyone should have to go through the same process, to your point. I want to come back to the complaint itself. So, Erin, I'm going to kind of combine two questions that I see being asked a little bit repeatedly here. One question comes from the chair of our board, Terry Williams, who asks if there's been a response from the federal agencies to the complaint, and then what's the timing of the response. And I want to combine this question with, Keisha, you tell me if I'm saying your name right or wrong. But her question is, how can the community get involved and stay involved, whether the complaint is successful or not?
Yeah, thank you for those. So in terms of timing, we submitted to the DOJ and the DOT. The DOJ had an electronic submission process where we could email directly. We also knew people at the DOJ that we were able to speak with the day that we submitted the complaint. There's been a bit of a delay because they're trying to figure out how the executive order impacts this. So we wrote them a letter and sent it last week explaining exactly what the problems with the executive order are and how that impacts our complaint, and also supplying them with some more data. We're in contact with the DOJ. They've received our letter. We're waiting on that. We're not sure exactly what the timeline is going to look like. And then with the DOT, they only had a mail-in process for the complaint, so that's moving much more slowly. But they are in contact with the DOJ as well. And then in terms of the community getting involved, I think this might be a good question for Betty and Shigun, actually, but I think that getting involved with groups that are working on these issues is probably the most important thing, as everyone here is, and continuing to apply political pressure. And really, what success looks like for the complaint is open to interpretation. The best case scenario is that we have a community involved process that brings people to the table. But part of the thing with the complaint is that we've already succeeded in some ways by drawing attention and forcing action from the mayor. And we've already been in talks with Mayor Janey about this and how to move forward. And so, as I think Shigun said at our last town hall, in some ways we've already succeeded. And so, continuing to apply political pressure, continuing to bring attention to this issue, I think that's the way that we're going to make real sustainable political change.
Thank you very much, Erin. So I see one other question here on YouTube from Carrie. Is this an opportunity for new businesses who have never done contracting or procurement to begin once this is settled or addressed? Well, Carrie, I would say to you, I think it might be the opinion of all of us that we don't want to wait until this process is done to help any business get in the queue for doing business with our cities or towns or the Commonwealth. So while we're working, as Erin noted, this process allows us to be in conversation with the Janey administration and with whoever wins in November and whatever the new or continuing administration is. But we don't want to wait until this process is done with the federal government to help your business. So please reach out either to us at info@becma.org or I think info@Amplify Latinx.com for any support that you might need to help your business be prepared to take some of these opportunities.
And in fact, it's Narosmi's point around expertise, right? So attorneys, like the role that our attorneys, our accountants, our marketing folks, like the professional providers play in this. And in fact, the city engages technical assistance providers like these to help businesses either hone their business plans, deal with contracts. So nothing stops, right? Just because this complaint is in place. It's actually an opportunity to keep moving this forward. So the Office of Economic Development is the one to go to, right, around these opportunities. So businesses should continue to engage in them, but you can leverage our organizations for support and access.
So Kaisha, thank you for that, for helping me out there. So Kaisha, one other question that she asked, and I'm going to combine this with a point that Nicola makes in the chat. So Kaisha asked, what would you say are the key issues to address here? Sourcing capital, demystifying the certification process. We've touched on this a little bit, but Nicola mentions that bonding is an issue as well for larger contracts. We need tools to help businesses scale up and real partnerships with businesses. So, part of this process too is going to make sure that, because I think another person asked how we will make sure everyone's involved in this process. This is all meant to be collaborative and to make sure that everybody's at the table. So when the DOJ or DOT reaches out to us and says, we're ready to have this conversation and to yank the city into this and make sure they're here to listen and take all the feedback that we're giving, everything that we're doing right now, where we're holding these conversations and making sure that all of our members and supporters and community know what's going on, this is exactly what we'll be doing all over again, is making sure that all of you are aware of when these conversations are taking place, so that all of us are able to participate and offer our suggestions and recommendations for how to substantively address this issue, so that in 10 years or 5 years, really, even when they do another disparity study, we're not talking about inching our way toward whole numbers, but talking about the fact that we're in double digits and look at how successful we were. So to this question of what are the key issues, I will note again that this report shows us that it's not always about the issue with the businesses themselves, but rather the process at the administrative level with the city or the town or the Commonwealth. That there are many of our businesses that do already have capacity. We do already have the capital necessary to take on these contracts, and yet and still are still not being awarded these contracts for whatever reasons that we won't speculate today. I'm sure many of us have stories or ideas of why that is. But for some reason, despite the fact that we are ready, we're still not getting those businesses, those contracts. But I know Betty noted earlier that, again, part of the issue is understanding the process, so helping our businesses understand the process. Nicola is absolutely right, particularly when it comes to construction, which this study shows that a little more than half of that $2.1 billion, I think it was 1.2 billion, were all in construction contracts. And so when it comes to Black and Latinx businesses, bonding is an issue. Unions are an issue in the sense that many of our businesses are not certified by unions, take on certain contracts. And so that becomes a barrier, and many other things. Access to capital, or I should say rather the distribution of capital, because we know how to access it. It's just that it's not given to us for different reasons. So all of these things are issues, but at the end of the day, the issue lies squarely with our government, whether it be local or state. And so it's really about making sure that we're getting business to those who already have capacity, while at the same time, simultaneously, we are helping the rest of our businesses scale up. So we're adding more to the pool for folks to take advantage of these opportunities. Any other thoughts from the group on that one?
Yeah, and I also think this is a place where we could get creative. And in fact, there's creativity that's been shown around, certain large contracts where a prime, right, can actually bring in minority-owned subs to help scale them up. Ultimately, so it's giving them a piece of, the economics of a larger contract, but also the participation in that contract, so that smaller business sees how things operate, is able to grow, and then ultimately become a prime contractor, right? But that requires having intention and intentionality by the prime, right? Meaning that they are bringing in smaller businesses to the fold with the goal of scaling them up. And that can absolutely happen, right? We've seen it with some of our, contracts. The bowling building is an example, right? Where one of the maintenance contracts, right, was broken up to allow a sub to get in there, and is doing an amazing job, and now can, ultimately is growing so that they can take on bigger agreements. And that should frankly just be a requirement, right, for large scale contracts, that there be MBE participation. And I think that coming up with these creative ways, showing good examples. There's examples from other cities on how they've done it well, and then constantly monitoring, right? So like the city of Philadelphia, I think New York and others, they do disparity studies annually, right? It's something that's integrated into this entire equity process. So for the city of Boston, that's ultimately the goal. Like it can't be every 7 years we do a disparity study. It's going to be this constant monitoring of where we are.
And to add to that, one of the things that all of us have been saying, in our public statements or in conversations like these, is the need for accountability. It should be somebody's job to make sure that these things are happening. And right now, whether it be as Erin noted, the latest executive order that doesn't go far enough, it sets all these wonderful, nice things. But if no one's job is dependent on hitting these aspirational goals or standing up a program that's actually meaningful, we will continue to be where we are today. So the accountability, everything that's been mentioned, all of that's important for any program that we stand up to gain our support. Couple of other questions that I see here. Let's see. Cheryl, I think this is the Cheryl that I know, but I won't make assumptions. But Cheryl asks, what can you do when a Black business submitted bids over and over, but still is not getting the contract, or you're being asked to put up your funds with the idea that they will reimburse you? And I want to tie this to another question or a point that Terry, our board chair, made, which is an experience that we've heard of as an organization, that it should be noted that some of our businesses were the lowest bidder and still are not getting the contracts, which is the issue with systemic racism. The issue with systemic racism is that we start to question our community rather than the system that keeps us out. So to both of these points, so Cheryl, for both of these, I would say, well, there are two things. So first of all, our wonderful partners here at Lawyers for Civil Rights. I think all of us would love to be in conversation and to hear your experiences. And, I should note again that this is what this process will allow with the Department of Justice and Department of Transportation. That will be the forum for all of our businesses to talk about their experiences with this system and with this process, to say, I've tried over and over again, and here's what's not happening, or here's what did happen. And all of those stories get collected, and that's how they help us determine what the commitment should be at the city level. But I would say, please reach out to us, tell us your story, and we can work together to try to address this specific case. But I know that on the public side of things, there's a little known commission that most folks don't know about or go to their meetings. And I admit I didn't go to any of them until a couple weeks ago. It's called the Boston Finance Commission. They're a state-appointed commission that were founded many years ago to hold the city accountable with its spending. So they essentially review every dollar and every contract that the city puts its stamp on. And so this is another tool that we will be using to hold the city accountable, as well as other avenues, whether it be the City Council Post Audit and Oversight Committee, or working directly with the Janey administration. So Cheryl, I would say reach out to us, and Terry is absolutely correct that there are stories of, the city, again, using all of these reasons and policies to keep us out. Sometimes it will be that we're not the lowest bidder, or they'll say, they'll read Chapter 30B differently the next time and say, oh, it's as lowest, most responsible, which is subjective and allows them to choose whoever they want for whatever reason. And will be why we don't get the contract. So Cheryl, please reach out to us. If this is the Cheryl that I know, then you got, text me and we'll chat later on. But if not, info@becma.org. I'll give you my cell too, but I just want to make sure which Cheryl it is. Let's see. Am I doing well on getting these questions, Jessica?
Yeah, there's a few more.
Yeah, Nicole Wiggins. Hello there, Nicole, fellow Hyde Parker. Is there talk about DCAM certification? And if a company is not approved, that certification or doesn't get that certification, what alternative is there that allows a company to still bid? Good question. Nicole, if you're able to reach out to talk about the DCAM certification and why you, and the reason they gave you for not being approved, we would like to be helpful in that conversation and change that around. But for those who don't know, DCAM certification is what prevents others, our businesses from getting contracts with the state. Because DCAM, most of the state's construction contracts really go through DCAM. And so if you're not certified, it gets very tough to get business. So would love to talk with you about how to reverse that so we can get you some business there. Nicola, our city councilors in Cambridge sanctioned a disparity study, which is a great start. However, they're seeking the services of the state certification office to conduct that study. Really? Comments. And I will say, Nicola helped to found the Black Business Network in Cambridge, which is a chapter of the Sustainable Business Network. And we encourage all of our business owners in Cambridge and Somerville to take advantage of that resource. In terms of what the City Council in Cambridge is doing, I'm not sure if anyone has comments on that. I'd love to learn more about what they're doing with that process, but I don't have any immediate comment on that, but I'm sure I will after talking to Nicola. Okay.
Yeah, that's an odd one.
Let's see, Joel asks, so he says he wants to hear speakers discuss what a collaborative community-involved public process on procurement policy development looks like. Yeah, I mean, sure. If Betty or Erin, you want to.
Yeah, I wonder if Erin can talk about the Suffolk Downs process, right? Because that was really community-driven.
Yeah, so essentially there are regional offices for the federal agencies. So we brought the Suffolk Downs complaint with HUD, and they had a regional agency that covers New England. And so they had investigators at that agency, or that regional part of the agency, come and meet with impacted community members. So this included going to houses, which is going to be a little bit more difficult during the pandemic. So it included people going to houses, having town halls, kind of similar to this one, and hearing people out, and then meeting with BPDA, bringing key stakeholders to the table. And then they secured voluntary compliance from BPDA. And so Title VI is broad. The remedies are flexible. This approach can look a lot of different ways. We're not sure that DOT or DOJ will be very similar to HUD. Each agency could do this very differently. So we're not entirely familiar with what the process will look like. We're hoping it will look something like that. We think that was very successful. So, these meetings, they might have a different process, and they will certainly have a different process given the pandemic and lockdown. But we will certainly keep everyone updated as it continues.
And I think, for especially BECMA, Amplify, GBLN, those that are parties to the complaint have a commitment to ensuring that this feels like a community-driven process. So that's why it's so important to have, all of you at the table in whatever format it takes, right? So these town halls were a first start, but as the federal agencies start to clarify what that process will be, our commitment to the community is to ensure that we hear as many voices as possible. So whatever format it takes, right, to ensure that we're hearing from you, we will implement.
And the last question I'm seeing here is from Leon. What's the breakdown of the full list of contracts offered? So Leon, first of all, great to have you here, straight from Mattapan. I'm not sure if you're asking about the 47,000 contracts that the Disparity Study covers or future contracts, but I'll talk about both. First of all, we'll post a link to the Disparity Study. It's 703 pages long. It's only 11:53 on a Saturday. If you really stick to it, you can get through half of it by the end of tomorrow. But one of the chapters does go through the categories of contracts, and there's a long list too of the breakdown of the dollar spend for each of those categories. But it covers 5 different categories: so construction design, professional services, goods, and supplies. Those are the general categories that city contracts fall under. And in terms of finding current contracts, we'll be happy to share the link on the city website. I can't think of it off the top of my head, but there is that information is available on the city website. It's not intuitive. You can't just go on the city website and say contracts, but we can share that list with you as well. Mm-hmm. Betty?
No, I was going to say that's part of the issue. Like, it's not easy to find where you find these opportunities.
Exactly.
So you have to sign up, and that way you start to get them, in your email box, right? Mm-hmm. Which you cannot always be checking. So.
Right. Yeah, and that's the same on the state level as well. Their CommBuys system is one of Dante's levels of hell. So, so I'm not seeing, if you have another question, please feel free, but I also want to be respectful of all of your time. Again, appreciate you all joining us on a Saturday morning. Where you could very easily just have stayed asleep in bed or been out doing an errand or at brunch right now, safely, of course. And so, but without any other questions, we'll be sure to share additional resources in our follow-up newsletters to you all and to keep you engaged on this process.
Yeah, and I would say that key is what is working for you. If you are getting city contracts, what works, what helped, right? It's just as important to hear about how the process felt for you as much as it is of what were the challenges or barriers that precluded you from getting a contract. Or how do you improve the process? Because part of this being community driven is that we want the solutions to come from our own businesses. And so hearing from you, telling your stories, is going to be really critical. So we'd love for, and we do appreciate too that some businesses don't want to speak up, right? They don't want to say anything because of, maybe they don't want to be out there criticizing. So don't take this as criticism, but rather an opportunity to shape a better process, a better contracting, process and procedures and policies that lead to equitable outcomes for everyone. Because in the end, everyone will benefit from these changes. So appreciate everyone joining us today. And Shagun, Aaron, thank you so much for leading this effort. You've been amazing partners.
Same here. This is
likewise.
This has been a great experience for all of us. Unfortunate though it may be that we have to take this measure, but happy that all of us as a community get to be involved in making the city and the state better, because whatever happens in Boston will have ripple effects across the rest of the Commonwealth. So we will end, as I always do, with somebody else's words, because it's always better. But C.T. Vivian, who is one of our civil rights legends who passed away last year, left us with a great idea or saying that having great ideas is great, thinking great ideas is wonderful, but doing great ideas is what counts. And so we're looking forward to working with all of you to not only have these great ideas that all of you have shared today at our first two town halls, but in working with the city to make them happen, because that's what counts and ensures that in 5 years, we're not having this conversation all over again. So thank you all very much for joining us. This will not be the last town hall that we have. Stay tuned for other dates, and please feel free to share with your network so that others can engage in these conversations as well. So thank you all very much, and have a great rest of your weekend.